offrant.
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à ce Lunch and Learn organisé par GoLogic en compagnie de l'équipe de Suse. Donc, Lunch and Learn qui va porter sur Rancher 2.6 et sur l'outil NeuVector. Bienvenue à tous, merci d'être là, merci d'être présent. Je me présente, je suis Lise-Andrée Dupéré, responsable du marketing chez GoLogic. Avec moi aujourd'hui, vous voyez à l'écran, on a Sean Rickerd qui est ingénieur commercial chez Suse. On a Martin Perron qui est directeur exécutif commercial chez Suse pour Québec et Atlantique. On a Jessica qui est who is account executive for NeuVector. She has a big territory, Canada, Eastern North America and Latin America. And we have also Tracy Walker, who is ingénieur de solutions for Suse, and Lisa, who is in charge of all the marketing at Suse. Donc, voilà, merci beaucoup d'être là. Brièvement, je vais présenter GoLogic pour ceux qui ne nous connaissent pas et qui sont nouveaux à une de nos activités de Lunch and Learn. Donc, GoLogic, on est entre 50 et 60 dans l'équipe. Ça fait depuis 2011 qu'on est spécialisé dans le DevOps. Donc, on a développé une approche stratégique qui se découpe en 3 volets. On a un bilan de santé DevOps, on fait de la formation, puis on fait du service conseil, donc coaching, banque d'heures, escouade, DevOps. Voilà, donc aujourd'hui, ben c'est ça, on va commencer avec Sean qui va nous présenter Rancher. Après ça, il va y avoir l'équipe de NeuVector qui va enchaîner. Puis ceux qui restent jusqu'à la fin, on a Sean qui va nous jouer quelques riffs de bass et on va pouvoir aussi voir un clip du band de Suse. Donc, restez, ça vaut la peine. Si vous avez des questions, je vous invite à les poser dans le chat, puis nos présentateurs vont y répondre soit au long de la présentation ou à la fin, idéalement. Et je mentionne également qu'il va y avoir une rediffusion sur notre chaîne YouTube de ce Lunch and Learn. Alors, sur ce, je vous souhaite un bon événement et je passe la parole à Martin Perron.
Hey, bonjour tout le monde, ça me fait vraiment plaisir d'être avec vous ce midi. Comme Lise-Andrée l'a si bien présenté, je suis directeur exécutif chez Suse pour la province du Québec et je couvre également les provinces atlantiques. Et très rapidement, je vais vous donner un aperçu de qui Suse est. Parce que Suse n'est pas une compagnie qui vient d'apparaître de nulle part. On est moins bien connu en Amérique parce que nos sources Nos racines sont européennes, sont allemandes, mais on est dans l'industrie depuis, on va célébrer notre 30e anniversaire cette année. On est avant tout, au début de tout, à l'origine, une distribution Linux de niveau entreprise, de niveau mondial. Et ce qui caractérise Suse, c'est une philosophie d'entreprise où, chez nous, dans nos solutions, tout est axé sur l'ouverture et sur vous donner et donner à nos clients la liberté de choisir et de déployer des technologies ouvertes et interopérables. Donc, on peut déployer nos solutions n'importe où, que ce soit sur site, que ce soit sur l'info-nuage ou encore dans un mode edge computing. On est partout. Donc, on est modulaire, on est facilement adaptable et on peut personnaliser nos solutions. Et comme je le disais, tout est axé sur l'ouverture dans tout ce qu'on fait. En grande partie, Suse a aussi beaucoup évolué depuis décembre 2020, lorsqu'on a fait l'acquisition de Rancher Labs. Et puis, Sean, mon collègue ici, ingénieur commercial au Québec, va vous présenter un petit bout de Rancher avec une démo rapide. Et on vient d'acquérir en fin octobre dernier la compagnie NeuVector. On en est extrêmement fiers et très excités. Et en gros, Suse, les faits importants, c'est qu'on est partout dans toutes les grandes industries. On est très présent. On est aussi la plus grande compagnie logicielle libre indépendante au monde parce qu'on est à ce jour indépendant, on n'appartient à personne, on n'a pas de lien avec des grands fournisseurs au niveau propriété comme IBM ou autres. Et on travaille aussi beaucoup avec tous les grands partenaires de l'industrie, que ce soit au niveau du cloud, de l'info nuagique ou au niveau de l'infrastructure avec les grands fabricants. On a des partenariats partout. Bien évidemment, Suse est aussi très impliqué avec plusieurs initiatives et impliqué dans plusieurs associations à travers le monde. En gros, comme dernière slide, que je veux vous montrer un petit peu le gros de nos solutions, on a au cœur de nos solutions tout ce qui tourne autour de Kubernetes. Et évidemment, tout tourne autour de Suse Rancher chez nous, notre offre Rancher, et maintenant NeuVector qui vient se joindre à cette famille-là. Et puis, on est aussi à la base une distribution Linux de niveau mondial qu'on retrouve partout. Et puis aussi tous les outils autour de ça, particulièrement une chose qui nous différencie puis qui vient aussi démontrer beaucoup notre ouverture, c'est une solution qui s'appelle Suse Manager. C'est une plateforme de gestion du cycle de vie de l'OS. Et c'est une plateforme qui est très ouverte, qui permet de gérer l'ensemble qui permet de gérer le cycle de vie de l'ensemble des distributions Linux sur le marché. Donc, on déploie une plateforme pour la gestion du cycle de vie et on gère l'ensemble des distributions Linux. Et nos solutions, on peut les déployer, peu importe les environnements, que ce soit sur place, sur site, que ce soit dans l'info-nuage ou que ce soit dans le Edge, on est partout. Donc, en gros, c'est qui nous sommes et je vais repasser la parole à Lise André et Sean pourra présenter à partir d'ici. Merci beaucoup.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Martin. En fait, Sean, je te passe la balle. C'est quand tu es prêt.
Parfait. Bonjour tout le monde. Comme Martin avait dit, Suse, ça fait c'est pas une nouvelle compagnie. Moi, ça va faire 9 ans la semaine prochaine que je suis avec Suse. Alors, je suis ingénieur commercial pour Suse. Je m'occupe du Canada au complet, mais avec un focus vraiment sur la province du Québec, le gouvernement fédéral et les provinces atlantiques. Alors, je vais partager mon écran vite et je vais rentrer tout de suite dans la démo de Suse Rancher. Alors, tout le monde peut me confirmer que vous voyez mon écran? Oui, on va y aller avec ça. Alors, voici Suse Rancher. Pour ceux qui connaissent Rancher est une solution de logiciel libre qui a été acquérie par Suse en 2020. Et l'outil comme tel, Suse Rancher, de version communautaire, est exactement pareil que la version entreprise. La version entreprise, bien sûr, vient avec du soutien. Soutien 24 heures sur 24 de gamme entreprise, justement pour les charges de travail qui sont critiques et qui doivent être toujours en marche. Alors, pour commencer, pour vous montrer qui est Rancher 2.6, voici la page d'entrée. Ceci est la page Home que vous allez avoir une fois que vous rentrez dans le système. Et vous pouvez voir qu'en ce moment, moi, j'ai deux clusters. J'ai un cluster local et un cluster multinode. Le cluster local va toujours être là. Ça, c'est le cluster dans lequel Rancher existe. Dans mon cas, j'ai créé un cluster de un nœud. Et oui, je sais que c'est un peu contraire de dire un cluster de un nœud, mais dans le monde de Kubernetes, c'est absolument possible de faire ça. Et dans mon local, c'est où existe mon kube system, mon Rancher comme tel, et toutes les choses que Rancher a besoin pour rouler son application et son interface graphique. L'autre en dessous, c'est un multinode cluster que j'ai construit qui existe en ce moment dans AWS. Et avec Rancher, on est capable de gérer n'importe quel cluster de Kubernetes qui est certifié CNCF, alors le Cloud Native Computing Foundation. N'importe quelle distribution qui est certifiée CNCF peut être roulée et gérée par Rancher. Alors, je vais rentrer tout de suite dans quelque chose. Je vais vous montrer comment on va créer un cluster. Dans notre page de Create, on peut voir que j'ai Amazon EKS, Azure AKS, Google GKE. J'ai aussi Amazon EC2, Azure, DigitalOcean, Linode, VMware, vSphere, et après ça, j'ai Custom. Custom, c'est utilisé pour, si vous avez déjà créé des nœuds, mettons sur place, et vous voulez entrer ça dans le monde de Rancher, ça serait possible de faire ça comme ça. Alors, si vous avez des machines physiques sur lesquelles vous voulez rouler Kubernetes, vous êtes capable d'installer RKE directement à travers de l'application et de l'interface graphique de Rancher, et après ça, les amener dans le cluster. Vous allez voir aussi que Amazon se montre deux fois ici. On a EKS et EC2. Azure, c'est la même affaire avec AKS et Azure. La différence entre ça, c'est vraiment qui est en charge du Kubernetes. Avec Amazon EKS, Azure AKS et Google GKE, c'est vraiment le fournisseur d'infonuages qui va s'occuper du cycle de vie du Kubernetes, dans le cas d'Amazon de EKS. Et en dessous, c'est vous. Alors, l'idée avec cela en bas, c'est vraiment de lancer RKE, qui est le Rancher Kubernetes Engine, ou RKE2, ou K3S, pour rouler le Kubernetes dans des instances sur ces infonuages-là. La différence, c'est vraiment avoir soit plus de contrôle sur l'environnement ou avoir plus de temps libre. C'est bien, on se comprend que si c'est EKS, vous n'avez pas à gérer la couche de Kubernetes. Si c'est RKE ou RKE2 ou K3S, vous devez gérer ça. Moi, je vais aller créer un autre cluster Rancher à travers de EC2. Alors, celle-là, je vais l'appeler Single Node Cluster parce que ça va être seulement un nœud. J'ai déjà créé un cluster avec multiples nœuds tantôt que je vous ai montré. Et on va appeler ça le nœud en charge parce que c'est lui qui va faire le tout. J'ai mes templates ici. Et bien sûr, moi, en étant un travailleur de Suse, j'aime ça manger ma propre bouffe, mettons. Alors, j'aime ça rouler ça sur Suse Linux Enterprise. Dans ce cas-ci, c'est Suse Linux Enterprise 15 SP3. Mais c'est toujours possible de rouler ça sur d'autres distributions qui sont certifiées Rancher, comme Red Hat, CentOS et Ubuntu. Alors, dépendant de ce que vous voulez, bien sûr, on aimerait que vous roulez ça sur du Suse, mais vous n'êtes pas obligé. Ici, à Auto Replace, ça c'est quelque chose qui est un peu intéressant. À travers de Rancher, vous êtes capable de créer un genre d'auto-guérison pour votre cluster. Si vous avez un cluster de multiples nœuds, vous êtes capable de marquer des minutes dans lesquelles le kubelet va checker si le nœud est en vie. Et puis, s'il n'y a pas de réponse pendant, mettons, 5 minutes, ça va tuer le nœud et ça va en créer un autre dans l'infonuage. Alors, ça, c'est une façon de vraiment avoir un peu d'auto-guérison dans les infonuages que vous créez à travers de Rancher. Bien sûr, dans le monde de Kubernetes, nous devons avoir trois choses, qui est le etcd, qui est la base de données pour Kubernetes, le control plane, qui gère vraiment toutes les charges de travail, et après ça, le worker, qui est justement les nœuds qui vont rouler certaines choses. Alors, dans mon cas, puisque c'est seulement un nœud, je choisis les trois. Si je voulais faire plus qu'un nœud, je serais capable d'ajouter ici et en mettre autant que je veux. Dans notre cas, on va s'en faire un, mais c'est aussi facile que ça. Si je veux les enlever, je clique là. Dans Member Roles, ça, c'est les rôles dans Rancher. Alors, moi, j'ai seulement un utilisateur dans mon environnement Rancher qui est le default admin. Mais si j'avais plus qu'un utilisateur de Rancher, je serais capable de donner des rôles et des permissions ici pour certains utilisateurs. Mettons que ce soit quelqu'un qui va être le cluster owner, qui va être en charge de tout, juste un administrateur qui aurait des droits restreints, ou juste un utilisateur qui a juste le droit de déployer des applications et rien d'autre. Alors, c'est très facile d'ajouter des rôles ici. Après ça, dans le Kubernetes Option, je peux choisir la version de Kubernetes que je veux. Dans Suse Rancher, on supporte une fenêtre de 4 versions. Alors là, dans la version que je roule en ce moment, qui est 2.6.2, on a 1.21.10 jusqu'à 1.18.20. Quand on va lancer la prochaine version de Rancher, qui va être 2.7, 2.18 va disparaître. Ça va être maintenant 2.22 ou 2.23 jusqu'à 3 versions en arrière de ça. Dans mon cas, je vais juste choisir 1.20.15. Je peux choisir mon network provider. De base, on a 4 qui est supporté par Suse Rancher, Canal, Weave, Calico et Flannel. Vous pouvez utiliser d'autres network providers, mettons comme Cisco par exemple, mais ça veut dire que le soutien pour cette pièce-là va venir de Cisco et non de Suse. Je descends en bas. On peut choisir un private registry. Ça, c'est très important pour des compagnies qui ont des restrictions de réseautique, mettons comme les gouvernements ou la police ou l'armée, des choses comme ça, où ils ne peuvent pas avoir d'accès à l'Internet en dehors de leur réseau. On est capable de créer un registry pour les images de conteneurs et justement pointer à cela avec un URL et un code d'utilisateur et dans mon cas, on va faire ça disabled. Et en bas, à la fin, le authorized endpoint, ça, c'est toujours important parce que si jamais Rancher tombe, on va cogner sur le bois que ça n'arrive pas, mais c'est de la technologie, c'est jamais à 100%, même si c'est à 99.999. Si jamais Rancher tombe et vous avez le authorized endpoint, cluster endpoint enabled, vous êtes capable de pareil travailler avec les clusters qui sont toujours en marche sans avoir à passer à travers de Rancher. Si c'est disabled, puis Rancher tombe, vous n'avez pas accès à ces clusters-là. Alors, c'est toujours important d'être sûr que ça, c'est enabled. Alors, je vais cliquer sur Create et ça va envoyer toutes les informations à Amazon pour justement créer mon cluster de earner. Et on va donner du temps à ça et on va y retourner. Là, vous voyez, ça commence à provisionner. Je vais rentrer dans mon multi-node cluster pour vous montrer vraiment plus en détail qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire avec ça. Alors, je vais aller ici. Je vais retourner ici et je vais aller dans mon cluster pour aller dans ce qu'on appelle le Cluster Explorer. Ici, on peut voir tout de suite à la première page les ressources qu'on a, qu'est-ce qui est utilisé, qu'est-ce qu'on a de libre, etc., etc. Mais qu'est-ce qui est vraiment le fun, c'est ici dans notre Apps and Marketplace. Ici, on a des applications qui ont été certifiées et que vous pouvez installer en utilisant quelques clics directement dans votre cluster Rancher. Tout ce qui est en bleu a été créé et supporté par Suse Rancher. Bien sûr, vSphere CPI, ça a été créé par VMware, mais c'est supporté par Suse Rancher à travers un partenariat qu'on a. Tout ce qui est en jaune, ça, c'est des choses de nos partenaires. Et le soutien pour ça va venir de ces partenaires-là. Par exemple, Datadog pour du data storage. On a aussi Trilio pour du backup. On a NeuVector qui est là. Ça va devenir bleu dans pas beaucoup de temps. Et on a d'autres choses. Alors, toutes ces choses-là sont certifiées, sont prêtes, sont dans le marketplace. On peut l'installer tout de suite facilement. Je vais vous montrer ça tout de suite en installant le monitoring, parce que c'est toujours important de savoir la santé de notre cluster. Et vous pouvez voir ici, ça va vous donner toute l'information qu'on a besoin, ainsi que d'informations sur les Helm charts. Alors, tout ce qui est dans le marketplace, c'est basé sur des charts Helm, qui rend la chose beaucoup plus facile. Si je clique sur Install, je peux choisir dans quel projet je veux l'installer. Je vais le mettre dans Default, parce que c'est par défaut. On va cliquer sur Next. Et ici, je serai capable de changer certaines configurations. Moi, je vais laisser ça pas mal tout ordinaire, mais on peut changer l'intervalle de scrape. Alors, si on veut que ce soit à toutes les 5 minutes à la place de 1 minute, on peut changer ça là. On peut changer le learning, etc., etc. Et on peut même aller dans Edit YAML et le faire à la mitaine en faisant un edit du fichier YAML comme ça. Alors, moi, je vais juste cliquer Install pour que ça y aille. Et ça va ouvrir une petite fenêtre en bas qui va vous montrer exactement qu'est-ce qui se passe dans le cluster. Alors, ça va vous montrer que c'est bel et bien en train d'installer. Ça nous donne toute l'information là-dessus. Justement, ça m'amène à un autre point. Rancher est unique envers la façon qu'on approche les clusters. Nos compétiteurs aiment ça mettre une couche entre l'utilisateur et vraiment le cœur de Kubernetes, qui est kubectl. Nous, on ne voit pas ça comme ça. On voit ça que c'est utile et on veut l'avoir facilement disponible. Alors, juste en haut ici, on a le kubectl shell. Ça nous ouvre un kubectl qui marche exactement comme on penser. Je peux faire un get pods et ça me donne des. Oh, j'ai rien dans le porte encore. Et ça nous donne un kubectl qui marche à 100%. Je peux créer des pods, mettons un nginx en utilisant l'image, nginx. Et ça va créer un pod là. Et là, si je fais un autre kubectl, get pods, je devrais voir mon nginx qui est là, qui est en train de créer. Et ça rend la vie plus facile. De plus, on est toujours capable de créer des workloads à travers de Rancher. Mettons un déploiement ou un daemon set. Je vais faire un déploiement, la même chose que j'ai fait avec notre pod. Et je peux créer un déploiement de nginx à travers de notre interface graphique. Alors, je vais faire nginx dep. Je vais choisir nginx latest. Et je vais choisir. Je vais ajouter un port parce que, bien sûr, ça a besoin d'être capable de se connecter. Alors, port 80. On n'est pas obligé de mettre quoi que ce soit dans le listing. Ça va être créé. Et je vais mettre 3 replicas directement ici. Et de là, c'est fait. Je peux cliquer Create. Et ça va créer un déploiement directement dans mon environnement. Et qui va avoir, justement, 3 replicas. Si je veux changer ça, mettons que je sais que je vais avoir un influx d'utilisateurs, je peux aller ici, je peux rentrer dans ma machine, je peux faire un config ici et changer mon replica. C'est que ça me donne accès. Config. Je peux changer ça à 5, descendre ici à Save, et vous allez voir que mon replica monte de 3 à 5. Alors, c'est facile comme ça. En installant mon monitoring, ça a créé une petite chose ici à côté. Alors, les applications que vous installez deviennent plus faciles à accéder. Alors, mon monitoring est maintenant là. Je peux aller directement à mon Grafana dashboard et je vais commencer à avoir des informations sur la santé de mon cluster tout de suite. Voilà comme ça. Alors, grosso modo, ça, c'est la démo vite. Si vous avez de l'intérêt à en savoir plus, n'hésitez pas de nous contacter. Martin et moi, ça nous fait plaisir de passer 1 heure avec vous et vraiment faire une démonstration en détail avec vous et même parler d'autres technologies qu'on a à travers de Rancher comme Longhorn qui est du stockage persévérant et Harvester, qui est notre solution de hyperconverge dans le monde de Kubernetes, alors déployer des VM en utilisant Rancher. N'hésitez pas, contactez-nous. On est là pour vous et ça va nous faire plaisir de vous aider. Alors, with that, I'm going to pass it along to Jessica, who will talk about NeuVector.
Wonderful.
Jessica?
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and intro as well as turn on my camera here. And thank you all for being here today. Yes, I'm going to talk about NeuVector, and then I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Tracy, who will go through a bit of a live demo for us. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. Perfect. Thank you for your patience. It wouldn't be a live session if something didn't give me a bit of trouble, so thank you. Perfect. Okay. Hopefully you should see it now. Perfect. You guys should be able to see my screen. So I'll go through NeuVector. To give you a bit of background, Suse purchased us last November, and we are in the process of integrating with the team. We have two sides of the product that we'll cover today. We have the supply chain security as well as the runtime security. So on the top half, supply chain security, what this refers to is vulnerability management and scanning throughout the consistency of the software development lifecycle. So from image creation through to runtime. And additionally, we have easy compliance reporting. So reporting on things like SOC 2, PCI, NIST, HIPAA. Let's see, I got a report that we're not seeing my screen here.
No, Jessica.
Okay, my apologies. Well, then with that, I will just give you a brief verbal overview rather than slow down the whole process here. So for the team's awareness, we have two sides of the product that you'll want to keep in mind. We have the vulnerability management side, which refers to full lifecycle scanning and also easy compliance reporting. And then we have the runtime security side, which refers to several things that differentiate us in the marketplace. One of those being layer 7 visibility and validation. And so what this means is we operate very much so like a network tap, allowing us to see the live network traffic inside of your clusters and allowing us to do deep packet inspection, and not only deep packet inspection, but also true data loss prevention. So those things are very, very important when we think about the layer of visibility that we have. And additionally, we have another capability called zero trust controls. And what this refers to, Tracy will show you, but we come in and we learn the application's behavior, and then we either alert or inline block on anything that is anomalous outside of that normal observed behavior. And so that's really important for things when we think about like 0 days or log4j or unpatched CVEs, those types of things that will really give your security teams big headaches, we'll be able to prevent against. And so I will stop there to give Tracy the most amount of time to demo, and so you can actually see a live screen. But that kind of gives you a taste for how we operate today, and some important things to remember too before Tracy shares. We have a few key differentiators. One, that layer of visibility is really huge, so keep that in your mind as Tracy is presenting the layer 7 visibility. Additionally, the way in which we're deployed, Tracy will cover it as well, but we are deployed as a container in your environment. And because of this, we're not using agents or sidecars, so we can scale to really, really large environments without, causing Kubernetes to topple over like it would if you were using, say, an agent or a sidecar-based solution. So just a few differentiators to kind of keep in mind while Tracy is presenting, and he'll highlight those as well. But very excited to show you guys this today. And with that, I will pass to Tracy.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we see a very colorful logo.
Yes, that's my tip of the hat to the Nordiques. Since I am here in Denver, Colorado, thank you for the Nordiques, because we're big fans here in Denver. Let me start out. I will try to speak a little slower, and I'll just kind of cover what Jessica was just talking about. I'll break this up into a portion where we'll talk about the supply chain security, and then I'll talk about the runtime security, since that's our differentiator and that's what makes us unique. So first, we'll talk about the scanning. There are lots of scanners out there. Everybody has scanning for vulnerabilities. The way that I would describe NeuVector and how we are able to secure the supply chain is we start out with pipeline scanning, so we can scan for vulnerabilities and security compliance in the pipeline. We can break builds based on the number of CVEs found or security settings. Once an image is in, oops, sorry about that. Let's jump. I guess that's from jumping back and forth. There we go. Once an image is pushed to a registry, we can scan in that registry. I will show you what that looks like. I'll spend a little time on admission control. Admission control is the gatekeeper for allowing images to come into a cluster and run. So this is pod security policies, or PSPs. So we've taken those rules, we've added to those rules. We've also added some enterprise feature. We plug into the admission controller in Kubernetes and Rancher, but we are independent of the pod security policies. So pod security policies are being deprecated in version 1.25 of Kubernetes, but in NeuVector, we will still have those policies because we're independent of that. We will still use the admission controller, but we have our own rules. So I'll spend a little bit of time there. And then we can scan containers that are running live in the environment. So I'll start there and we'll work our way back. So let's stop there. So starting here under assets, so we do scan the platform. So Kubernetes, Rancher, OpenShift, any flavor of Kubernetes, we can scan for vulnerabilities. We do scan the worker nodes underneath those containers. So here you can see I've got 3 containers. I see I've got one failed my scanning, but that's okay. You see here we're looking at the CIS benchmarks for Kubernetes. So these are the compliance. These are the security settings that we check for those nodes, as well as vulnerabilities on those nodes. So these are the worker nodes underneath the cluster. And then the containers that are running on that cluster, we scan those as well. So these are containers that are running live. We can check them for, in this case, the Docker CIS benchmarks for security settings. So you can see all of the checks that were done, all the warnings. And we also check all of those containers for vulnerabilities. So that's the live environment. Registries, when we do a scanning of registries, actually, I'll take this one here. There we go. Here you can see the image at the top layer, the entire image. We have the Docker file that was used to create that image. And then as we go into the layers, you can see the results of the layered scanning. These layers have the vulnerabilities. And here you can see the Docker file command used to create that layer. So this helps speed up remediation. You know where to make the fix. We have links to the source of all of the CVEs so that you can get the information directly from the source. We pull from 15 different CVE database sources. So these are our sources for exploits. We update our database every 24 hours. So we're always up to date on CVEs. We also highlight here, you can see modules. So we do summarize modules. We do deep scanning. So we're scanning jar files, WAR files, zip files, anything that's in the image, we will scan and we can summarize. Here you can see a jar file that if we update that jar file, we can knock out 35 vulnerabilities. So that makes it also easy to kind of identify what things need to be fixed. So that covers the registries, all of the places where we can do the scanning. Like I mentioned, we have plugins for Jenkins, so we can break the build in those pipelines and produce those results immediately as soon as the image is built. And I mentioned I would talk about the admission control. So again, this is the doorman in front of Kubernetes checking IDs, right? Looking for images that meet our criteria. And so if I select some criteria here, you'll notice things that you may recognize as pod security policies like run as privilege, run as root, IPC, and network namespaces. So these are common. In fact, we've even bundled a group of these known as the best practices for PSPs into a single rule. But this is where we start to do things a little bit more than you can do with pod security policies, because we can do complex rules. We can do rules based on CVE counts. Here, a high severity count of CVEs with fix. That means that there's a published fix. So if the fix is reported, let's say I give my developers 21 days to make those fixes. Now that seems like a long time, right? 3 weeks to patch a vulnerability. We can protect you against unpatched CVEs. We protect against 0 days, unpatched unknown CVEs. We have security for that. So we can give our customers and their engineers more time to fix things because we have security for that. And you'll notice we're doing complex rules here. We can do deny rules as well as allow rules, which you cannot do with PSPs. And also notice this monitor and protect. So as Jessica was mentioning, I think we do have this concept of monitor mode and protect mode. Monitor mode means we won't block the image. The image can come in and it can run. We won't tell Kubernetes admission controller to block that image. In protect mode, we will block that image. We won't allow it to run in the cluster. So this is one of the ways you can very quickly implement admission control in your pipeline. And in monitor mode, you can do this in a day. You're not going to block anything. You're not going to make anybody upset. But you will get the data of anything that was allowed in. You'll get to know what images would fail your tests. And we do things also like, you'll notice here, was the image scanned? Did the image come from my registry? I don't want it coming from public registries. I want it to come from my registry, right? Things like that. Particular namespaces, right? So we've really expanded what you can do with pod security policies, and we've made it much more relevant to CI/CD and supply chain security. Last thing I'll take a quick gander at, and I'm going to jump to a different cluster because I was noticing my little demo cluster, I may have put too much stuff in it and it was moving a little slow. So here, you'll notice under security risk, if I go to compliance profile, so this is the CIS benchmarks, that list right there. And then you can see we've got regulatory for PCI, GDPR, HIPAA, and NIST. So we've got the compliance there aligned with the CIS benchmarks. That means that we can report off of those. And you'll notice there's even some gaps here. So the CIS benchmarks are the gold standard right now for security, recommended security settings for Rancher and Kubernetes. So in the compliance section here, excuse me, you'll see we do a summary. So these findings, you can see the containers that are affected by this. Now, and apologies for anybody who may be colorblind, the green and the red, but all of these containers need to have this setting fixed. But the ones in green we are protecting, and the ones in red are not protected. They're probably in a discovery mode. So all of these have this problem. We are just able to protect those that are in the green. And that's just because I have different settings set on those. So yes, we can report, like say on NIST, these are the regulatory compliance for NIST. So it does give you some ways of doing regulatory compliance that way. And for the vulnerabilities, here we're showing all of the vulnerabilities in the environment. You can see which images have these problems, and as well as any running containers that have these problems. And you'll notice that these are also all in green because we're protecting them. If you don't have this patched, we can still protect them. In fact, this filter here is very interesting. So high with fix. So every one of these vulnerabilities has a patch. You can fix those, you can patch them. If I change my filter to high without fix, and these do not have patches. There's no fixed version for any of these CVEs. And that becomes the question. What do you do about CVEs that you cannot patch, right? This is affecting this one. Do we need to change the library? What do we need to do? Well, we can protect you against CVEs that do not have patches in our runtime. So I'll take a pause there. Any questions so far? Excellent. Well, then I will move to the exciting part of the presentation, which is where we will talk about the runtime. So this is what differentiates NeuVector from Aqua, StackRox, SNCC, all of the eBPF solutions. So let me explain what we do. Inside of Kubernetes, you have east-west traffic between all of the containers and pods, right? This is all the network traffic. You may have great visibility over the ingresses and egresses into the cluster, right? Perimeter firewalls and load balancers, things like that. But inside of this cluster, you don't really have the visibility that other vendors claim to have, right? So Aqua, StackRox, SNCC, Sysdig, everybody that's using eBPF, right? They're looking at the kernel on the worker nodes, and they're getting layer 3, layer 4 information about routing, right? So when they talk about visibility, and if visibility is on your buzzword bingo card, I don't know if that translates well to Canada. I shouldn't use that analogy, but yes, if you hear other vendors talking about visibility, they're talking about routes. They don't see the actual traffic. Traffic doesn't happen on the kernel of the worker node. The traffic happens on the virtual network interface card on those nodes, right? And so they're talking to the kernel. Meanwhile, all the traffic is happening on the VNIC. And that is what NeuVector was built to do. We see all of that traffic. Not only do we see the traffic, we validate that traffic like a network device. We are able to identify the layer 7 protocol. So these protocols, we identify every one of these protocols and we validate that protocol. When I say validate, that means we are checking the protocol to make sure it doesn't have any threats in it. So we can detect all of these kinds of threats in the network traffic itself. And that is something that those other products cannot do because they don't see the traffic. They only see the routes, layer 3, layer 4 information. They cannot see this. So NeuVector is using, I'll stay there. Here we go. NeuVector is using the network as its source of truth, right? We're not using the kernel as our source of truth. The other products that do that, they have to combine that data with IP table changes and port labels and deployment YAML, and they take data from different sources and they smush it together and say, this is what your network is doing. That's not what your network is doing. We see what your network is doing, all of it. We're using the network as our source of truth. So that's key. We also see all of the processes that are running on each one of these containers. And so because, again, we're not using eBPF to identify this information, we're more efficient. We can capture these processes. We can create a behavioral policies, security policies based on the network that we see as well as the processes that we see so that we can establish zero trust. We know your behavior, your application behavior, and anything that is not that behavior, we can alert you to or block, right? So that is a really important concept, that zero trust. In fact, all of these things are unique to NeuVector. None of the competition does any of this because they don't see the network traffic. We can learn that behavior automatically. I will show that to you. We can generate those policies automatically. Jeez. Pardon. Security as code. We can export those policies in a YAML file. I will show you that. Nobody else can do that. That is why we can block 0 days. We know your behavior. Anything that is not your behavior, we can alert you to or block it automatically. Same with unpatched or unknown CVEs, right? We don't know what CVEs are going to be published next week. That's why CVE chasing and scanning incurs a lot of IT debt because it's always happening. You always have to react to it, and it's always in the historical view, right? CVEs that happened today or yesterday or a month ago, you don't know what's coming. You need real security to prevent things from happening that you don't know are coming. We are the only product that I am aware of that can do live packet capture inside of the cluster. We can even trigger that packet capture when we see a network threat. I will demonstrate that as well. We can also do data loss prevention. We can check the payload of the network traffic and look for credit card numbers or personal IDs or anything that you want to check to make sure it doesn't leave your environment. We can do that DLP for you. So what I will demonstrate is I will take a container that has behavior. It runs a website. We're going to just take that one container. I'm going to delete its behavior. We're going to start fresh. I will move it to discover mode, where we will learn the behavior. We'll learn all the network traffic. We will learn all the processes, and you'll see that. Then I'm going to move it to protect mode, not monitor, but protect mode and monitor mode work very similar. Monitor mode means that if we see anything that is not your behavior, we will alert you to it, but we will not block it. So you can use the monitor mode as a test mode. We have customers that run in production in monitor mode because there's no risk. There's no performance risk. There's no blocking. It's perfectly safe. The protect mode, as you might expect, we will block any anomalous behavior. So this gives you automatic protection for anything that is anomalous. So I will demonstrate all of that for you right now. So as I mentioned, I have a container here, and we'll look there. So we've got a container, and I've got known processes. So here's some processes that we've seen. It's running a Java application on Apache Tomcat. So I'm going to delete those processes. Oh, and I just realized I'm in the wrong cluster. That's funny. Let's go here to groups. Same thing. I'm glad I caught that early because that saves us a lot of, same thing. Java, pause. I'll delete those. Delete those rules. And you'll notice here network rules. So I'm going to delete these also. The network rules are managed from the network rules tab because this is kind of like a firewall. This is an ordered list. We work top down. At the bottom of this list is deny all. You see, these are all allow rules. So I will filter down to those two rules. We're going to remove our network behavior. Excellent. All right. So no processes, nothing up my sleeve. No network rules, no magic tricks. File access rule. So I haven't talked about this. You'll notice that we've got a file mount point directory, recursive. So we're watching everything in this directory. We are automatically protecting. So you see all of these system locations like user local bin, etc host, etc password. We're already protecting those. We know the files and the directories for the system, for the container that need to be protected. So you don't have to set that up. That's all automatic. But you can add mount points. And in the discover mode, we will learn any applications that access that particular file. So now that we've removed our behavior, let's learn the behavior. So this container is running this web app right here. Very simple web app. It's on a public IP address. And so what I'm going to do is move to discover mode so we can learn our behavior, learn the network, learn the processes. So now we're in discover mode. I'm going to create a new order. I will do an order for Martin. Just going to generate some traffic here, right? Maybe I delete Jeff. I'm just trying to exercise the application. I need to create some HTTP traffic. I need to exercise the Java that's running there. And if I hit refresh, well, there it is. That's what we saw a while ago, right? We saw Java, we saw pause. There's HTTP traffic that's flowing, right? Let's add a little bit to this. So I've already prepared to bash into that container, right? This container is running on that IP address. Let's just double 152, 149, 152, 149. So we're in the right place. I'm just going to bash into this container, right? So this should be behavior that we should be able to record. Who am I? I am root, right? So I'm already at a privileged level. I should be able to run anything that I want. ls, bu, let's do a ping of, let's see, this is a Google environment. So I'll ping amazon.com. So I got some ping there. As I do that, when I hit refresh, the network traffic will be there. Oh, well, there you can see the ping. You can see the bash. You can see other behaviors happening right there. I'm going to Control C one more time. du, let that complete. Just want to see that it's learning all of these commands as I'm doing them. And sometimes it takes just a second for those to come back up. And this also might be BusyBox that's doing this. So let's just for a moment, we're going to go ahead and move this to a protect mode. And now that I'm in protect mode, I know that bash and ping and those other commands that aren't showing up right now, those are not my normal behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those behaviors. So that all that we have left is Java and pause. And you'll notice here, even the DNS from the ping, right? We picked up that traffic there as well. I won't delete that one. But with those, and I'm still in this container, right? So I should be able to do ls. No, I cannot. du. How about remove -rf star dot star? I can't do anything. Who am I? I'm root. But I'm not allowed to do anything outside of these processes, right? That's zero trust. I trust those processes. I don't trust anything else. My Java application still works fine, right? Because I know that I've got HTTP traffic and I know that I can still submit and the application still works as normal. What if I were to attack this? Now, also, I'm still in the container. If I exit and try to get back into that container, it won't let me get back into that container, right? Again, that's anomalous, unknown behavior. If I go to notification security events, and I'll wait for a second as that refreshes. There we go. All right, there you see bash, right? And all of the notifications that we were just talking about. If I review this rule right here, I can say, no, that's okay. I want to allow bash. And I can deploy that rule back to that container straight from my notifications. There we go. And now I can log in. Can I do anything? No, I still can't do anything. So that's what we talk about zero trust, right? We learn those behaviors, etc. Let's attack this container. Let's do a little attack. All right, 152, 149. So I'm hitting this website, and I'm going to inject into my HTML using this Python script a netcat to my IP address here in Denver on the 1337 port. That's also known as LEET. It's also Istio's port that they use for their sidecars. 1337, and I'm going to try to establish a reverse shell, right? So I'm going to run a couple of commands. This is what it's going to, and I'm in protect mode, right? So we should be able to block this. So I hit return, and nothing is happening. It's not coming back. Let's go over here. I'll hit refresh. And we'll see if NeuVector sees that attack. Right there. Apache struts remote code execution. Critical network, right? And remember I was talking about packet capture? Show packet. If I scroll down right there, NC, there's my IP address, 1337 port. There's the shell. It's all there. That's what I was just trying to do. And NeuVector blocked it based on the fact that it recognized that this threat was in the network traffic itself. Aqua, StackRock, SNCS, they can't do this. This is not possible there. Let's pretend for a moment that we don't have a signature. Let's say this is a 0 day and we don't know what that is. And let's change the mode now to monitor mode. Change the mode right here. And what monitor mode means is that we will not block anything. We're going to allow everything to execute, but we're going to trigger alerts on that. So now I'll go back. And there you can see it just timed out. So let's clear a screen and run that exact same attack again. And see how fast that came back? Immediately, I got a response from Apache. There's my HTTP status 500. That's coming directly from my Apache web server, right? So that, from a hacker standpoint, that's a very good thing. I can now crawl this environment, figure out what other things I can connect to, what other processes I can run, etc. But I know that I'm talking to Apache. What NeuVector says about this, if I hit refresh, take a drink of coffee. All right. You see 38 seconds ago. So there's that remote code execution. But see how, notice before we blocked it at a network level. But this time, there's the netcat. There's the shell, right? We're seeing every process. This is every part of that kill chain. I could have blocked it at a network level, but remember, this is HTML coming into that container, right? We said that was okay, but we can detect in that traffic the remote code execution right there. And if I come here to my network activity, and I'll come back and show this as well. Let that come up. So here's that container, right? And you see here that we've got red line. So our normal behavior is over HTTP, right? If I click on that, we know that that is our normal behavior that we've just learned. But this activity, and if I click on this one, there's that Apache remote code execution, right? So we saw that in that network traffic. So that showed up as red. But then what's this one right here, right? And I'll just make this a touch bigger and move that so you can see what's going on. So see this external? Well, if I look at this, there's that ICMP that I was doing earlier, but there is my IP address. There's that 1337 port. We saw that egress going back to my house here in Denver, right? And that was a new thing that we haven't seen before, right? If I go to my notification security events, and I apologize, I know this loads a little bit slow, but this should now, by this time, that's updated with the full traffic. And there you see it right there, right? So we saw the shell, we saw the processes that were being attempted, and we saw the egress being attempted back to my house, right? Multiple layers of security, fully automated using your behavior, right? That's zero trust segmentation right there. The coolest thing about this is if I come here to my groups, I can export that behavior automatically. Save that. I'll just open that file, and there it is. Automatic security as code. There's my file. There's my egress. Here's my ingress. Here's the processes. Remember, we allowed that bash process. I can edit this file. This is my zero trust definition. I can do this for a namespace, the entire cluster. I can learn in development. I can test in QA. I can push this to production, and I have security before I deploy the applications, right? Zero trust segmentation. So that is what we do that no other product does. We're able to learn all of that behavior, establish those rules, turn them into security as code so that you can use zero trust across multiple clusters. Any questions?
Yes, Tracy, we have some questions.
Awesome. Oh, I see. How do you protect them if it doesn't have a patch? So if you don't patch, right, if there's an exploit, as I just showed, Any exploit is going to be a combination of network and process activity. I can't hack something if I can't make a network connection, right? I'm not going to go break into a data center because we've got lots of security layers there. So I have to get in through the network. I have to egress through the network, and I have to run things that are not going to be your behavior. Any exploit is not going to match your application behavior. That's how we're going to block that. That's how we block 0 days, right? So this is real security, and this security can change even in a rapidly changing environment. Every time you change your containers, we can maintain the behavior and keep up with that. About the CVE, how do you maintain up-to-date list of potential exposures? So we update our CVE database from that those 15 different sources every night. I'll show those again. So we update that every night, every 24 hours. Any updates from any of these vendors means that we have to do an update, and we push those to you every single night. The updates are actually done automatically. We can run in air-gapped environments. We just have to be able to update the CVE database on the scanner. So the scanner actually has the CVE database built into it. So we just update the scanner, and you can update that on a proxy host. You can pull it to your registry and then update it that way, however you do updates in an air-gapped environment. There's no SaaS components. There's no phone home. We're a security product. We run in very secure, high security environments, and so that's why it has to be able to run in your environment. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Very kind of you, Eric. You got to see it twice. I hope I was consistent. That's funny. How will NeuVector be deployed? Great question. Let's talk about the deployment model. So NeuVector deploys as containers. No agents. You don't have to change your images. You don't have to add anything to your images, and no sidecars. We do work with Istio. So if you're using Istio or Cilium or any Linkerd, and you're using a service mesh, we're fine with that. We work with those as well. We deploy 4 kinds of containers. The controller container, this one, it manages all of our API calls. So all of our containers talk to the controller. That's the central hub. And the controller is the only container that makes API calls of the Kubernetes or Rancher API, right? So we limit our communication with Kubernetes because we don't want to impact performance. Products that deploy agents throughout your environment or put an agent on every image, that usually means those agents are also talking to Kubernetes and generating a lot of API traffic that we find is undesirable. I mentioned the scanner. The CVE database is built into it. You can scale the scanner horizontally. So you can have multiple instances running. We will automatically load balance across all of those scanners. So you can scan through registries very, very quickly. The web UI, making API calls of controllers, so 100% API coverage. And finally, this enforcer, this is where all the patents are. This is where the technology is. We are looking at the network traffic coming off of the virtual switch, right? That's our differentiator. We act like a network device inside of your cluster. And that enforcer inspects that traffic and can also do the enforcement as well. I hope that answered the question about the deployment. And speaking of Istio, we work 100% with service meshes. So you can see the loop back traffic right there. And those containers look a little bit different. That's how we still see those sidecars. So we can still learn the behavior. We can still do packet capture. We can still quarantine the containers live without killing them. We just basically can block all the network traffic going to a container. And if I were to double click on one of those containers that has the sidecar, there's the proxy, right? So there's the container, there's its sidecar proxy. We see that traffic, right? Istio can encrypt traffic, but it only encrypts amongst the service mesh. It does not encrypt the traffic between the container and its sidecar. NeuVector sees that traffic we can still inspect that traffic. So the one thing about Istio, they in their documentation will say they cannot secure this channel. They cannot force all traffic to use that sidecar. You have to use a third-party mechanism or possibly network security policies. NeuVector can secure that traffic. We can make sure that all traffic must use that sidecar proxy. So very much NeuVector becomes a security layer for Istio if you happen to be using Istio or Linkerd or another service mesh. What kind of performance impact can we expect from the runtime scanning? Great question. So the runtime scanning, where we are scanning for vulnerabilities and things like that, I'm not going to say none. I'm going to say very, very, very minimal, because no one would believe me if I said none. Basically, and I'll just trigger, since I don't like this failed one, just going to turn it off. Now notice this is auto scan. So when I turn this back on, it will rescan the entire environment. Basically, when we scan, we always present the latest results. We only have to scan once. If anything changes, a new container comes in. I'll hit refresh here. There we go. I think my session also might have timed out. Yes, it did. I'm going to turn that off, and then I'll turn it back on. And then when I hit refresh, yeah, there we go. So now the scan status, and we can see how fast this goes. So scan is scheduled. We'll see how quick that goes. Basically, so if anything changes, we will rescan. If the CVE database changes, we will rescan. But we only have to scan once, and we ingest the image into our scanner. So we're not impacting the image that's running. We take a copy of what it is running in memory. We run that through the scanner so it doesn't impact any containers that are running, and that's how we do those scans. So no impact for the scanning. Now for the runtime security, right, where we're doing that, let me hit refresh. Is this done yet? For the runtime security, the impact from the discover mode and the monitor mode is 0. We run at line speed. We're a network tap. We're not in line with that traffic. So no performance impacts when you're running the runtime security scanning. When you move to protect mode, we are in line. We will incur in real world about 3 to 5% introduced line latency. So we'll add a little bit of lag. But again, it's like 3 to 5% of your line latency within your cluster, which is usually very, very low, right? You have a very fast connectivity between your nodes and within the cluster itself. So 3 to 5% of something very small is very, very small. So again, as Jessica may have mentioned, we have been performance tested in 1,000 node clusters by one of the hyperscale cloud providers that is now a customer. Not allowed to say who it is, but very big environments. And we were the only product, especially because we don't use agents, we were the only product to pass that performance testing at that level with 1,000 nodes. So we were very, very confident of our performance, that we will not impact performance of your applications. Please test. That's the best thing I can say there. And then I'll hit refresh. I know this thing is just running a touch slow. I need to re-look at that environment. Let's see. So we talked about the runtime scanning. NeuVector will be deployed. Will be deployed on nodes or just as a container? We deploy as containers. So we will deploy as containers on the nodes. I'm going to hit the refresh here. I want to see how fast that finished. Took a little bit longer than I thought. If I look at the system, so we have controllers. There's our scanners. I'm only running 2 scanners. And then we've got an enforcer because it's a 3-node cluster. So I have 3 enforcers. The last thing there's a lot of stuff I didn't talk about. I didn't talk about the DLP sensors, the data loss protection. You can see here, we can look for things like email addresses, OWASP top 10. I think in this version, IKS, you can see I'm running the 5.0 preview version. So this is the open source version. You can download this. Yeah, my session timed out. So you'll notice here under policy, I got DLP sensors and WAF sensors. So these WAF sensors are checking ingress traffic, and we're looking for things like cross-site scripting, injection attempts. Again, we're looking at the payload of the traffic. So there's that. And then you also see that I'm federated. This cluster is associated with this NV primary. Notice I'm the admin. I can't click around and see other clusters. I have full autonomy in this cluster, but I do have rules like this federated rule here that is being pushed from this master cluster. If I go back to this cluster, you can notice there's my AKS, there's my IBM, I've got another GKE. So across clouds, I can jump to those, and I can push rules from this cluster down to those other clusters, like network rules, admission control rules, things like that. Any other questions? Those were all good questions. Or did I miss any?
Thank
I think
you.
that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So I think we're going to move on with Sean. If you're ready to play us some riff or basis.
Yeah, I hope everybody likes jazz. I'm going to make it pretty simple here. And I guess I'll play you guys out. Thank you all. Merci. Ben, regarde, je vais retourner en français parce que c'est vrai, c'était Terry puis Jessica qui parlaient pas français. Mais j'espère que vous avez aimé les présentations. Comme vous pouvez voir, NeuVector, c'est très, très, très intéressant. Et avec cela, j'espère que vous aimez le jazz. On va avoir un petit peu de fun. On va voir comment ça marche.
Merci beaucoup. Excellent, excellent. Ben, merci à tous. Merci à l'équipe de Suse. Merci à l'équipe de NeuVector. Vraiment, bravo. C'était super. Puis avant, ben c'est ça, on voulait passer à la vidéo du Suse Band. Donc, est-ce que quelqu'un veut ajouter quelque chose avant? Martin, est-ce que tu voulais parler? On ne t'entend pas. Attends, on va t'ajouter.
Ah ben bonjour. Je voulais prendre le temps de vous remercier de nous avoir donné votre temps ce midi, d'avoir partagé votre temps. On est tous très occupés. Merci beaucoup de l'opportunité. Puis au plaisir de demeurer en communication avec vous. Et si vous avez des questions à l'extérieur de ça, n'hésitez surtout pas à communiquer avec nous. Mon adresse courriel à moi, c'est mon prénom et mon nom, donc martin.perron. À commercial suse.com. Donc, merci encore une fois. Merci à l'équipe de GoLogic de nous avoir permis de présenter ce midi. C'est très apprécié.
Super. Puis c'est ça, je pense que Jessica a dû quitter.
Oui, elle a dû quitter.
Bon, ben parfait. Fait que On va se laisser sur d'autres bonnes notes avec une vidéo du Suse Ben. Merci à tous.
Merci tout le monde. Au revoir.
Outside the door, there's a greener world than you've known before. Our chameleon helps you write your